Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hot Corner. I'm your host, Magown, and I'm joined here today by Harrison Duhr. We are now under 2 weeks until opening day, but there's still a lot to talk about surrounding the upcoming season. Our first question is surrounding the probably the hottest hitter in the league right now, in Cubs prospect Kris Bryant. He's been doing nothing but hitting home runs, and he leads all of baseball with 9 home runs, including 3 two-home-run games. But regardless of these numbers, the Cubs are most likely going to start him off in the minors so they can delay his service time clock from starting. He'll start down in the minors probably the first 12 days of the season, and then they'll probably bring him up. But is this the right move for the Cubs? What do you think?
It's the right move for 2 reasons. It's the right move because of his age, and it's the right move because of the business aspect of baseball. I'll start with the age. Listen, I know he's leading the Cactus League, with 9 home runs.
Not even Cactus League, even
the
Grapefruit.
Grapefruit League as well. Regardless, those games don't matter. They matter more so for prospects and veteran players trying to, stay alive and get a starting role or some sort of major impact on a contending team. But the Cubs are not fully ready yet. They realized that they had many, many changes this offseason with Joe Maddon, John Lester. They're finally trying to bring back winning baseball back to Chicago, which I appreciate a lot, but they're still not fully there yet. So why even risk Kris Bryant going up and struggling in the majors and really putting him in a funk, maybe messing with his mechanics, and just not getting the Kris Bryant they're expecting? Number 2, the business aspect of it. We're not going to lie. Baseball is a game of business when it's all said and done. By doing this, arbitration will be pushed back 1 year. And for a team like the Cubs, who are not like the Dodgers, the Yankees, they kind of need to get breaks like that. Small market to middle market teams need those little advantages. It's just the way business works. And I know fans are not going to be happy to hear that because, isn't winning really the important thing? Yes, it is, but it's winning long term, not just short term.
And he also does have Scott Boras, the most known and toughest agent out there.
That is a huge factor as well.
He likes to have his players, test their luck out in the free agent market and try and get a big deal there rather than signing a long-term contract even before they hit free agency.
Exactly.
But I think that he needs to start. He needs to be on that opening day roster for opening night on Easter because the Cubs right now, they've come out and said they are dedicated to winning. They want to do everything possible to, bring back, like you said, winning baseball to Chicago. And Anthony Rizzo came out and said, we're going to win this division this year. We're going to win the Central. No, I don't believe that.
I don't either.
But if they're all in, and like their owner said, we're all into winning, they need to have him on the roster to get out to a great start. So he doesn't go down to the minors, maybe lose a little bit of confidence saying, well, why am I guess he'll understand the business aspect of it. But, it also you can lose some confidence going down there. Just keep the hot hand, keep him in the lineup. That division was won by like 1 or 2 games by the end of that season on like the last day. He's going to miss about 9 games. Yeah, he's not going to, be the factor why they win those games. But he can have a huge hand in helping them get a big hit in a big spot and, maybe get them into the playoffs.
Well, you bring up a great point, losing confidence. We've seen that with a Cubs prospect already. Look at Javier Baez. Got brought up last season. Got off to a great start, as Kris Bryant right now, but the league figured him out. Strikeouts are a big problem, and he's having a god-awful spring training to the point where he might get sent down not only to Triple or Double A, but even Single A. He's striking out at an alarming rate. He's even losing his power. He's messing with his mechanics, and you know why? The Cubs brought him up a little too early. So why would you want to do that with Kris Bryant and have to go through the same exact ordeal?
But they also did that with Jorge Soler. I mean, they brought him up early too, and he seems to be doing well. Difference with him is they already have him under a long-term contract. They didn't have to worry about his service clock starting.
So it's a little different.
But
you're playing Russian roulette there. Javier Baez might never be the same because they brought him up a little too early. Yeah,
it's true. But I just think if you're dedicated to winning like the Cubs say they are, I think you go for it right out of the gate.
Well, you can bring him up later in the season. And,
they're going to bring him up after the first 12 days of the season.
I guess later in the year we could talk about, if the Cubs lost the division by 3 games, like what about those first 12 games? But, it's a long season. I'll go to another team in the Mets. They're not going to bring up Syndergaard because they know he's not ready. Why risk that?
A different story, though. I mean, Brian, in 28 at-bats, he has 13 hits, 9 of them are home runs. He also leads the league with 15 RBIs.
Noah Syndergaard led the Pacific Coast League in strikeouts last year. So is it different? There's obviously a lot of elements there they want to bring him up for, but he's still not polished yet. And Kris Bryant, might be hitting spring training pitchers. We don't know who these pitchers are, frankly. It could be anyone from
Did hit a home
Adam
run off
Wayne.
of King Felix. That doesn't happen too much.
It could be anyone from King Felix to, I don't know, Heath Bell, who just retired. There's a lot of different guys out there. You don't really know. You don't really know what pitchers are working on because it's spring training. They're not giving it their best. So you really can't look at those numbers too much. You can, however, look at those numbers for someone like Baez, who's really struggling to a point where you don't even recognize him.
This is an issue that's gonna probably take a look at, maybe the next collective bargaining agreement to just say, hey, maybe there's something else we can do to get these guys up and not have to worry about their service time. But this is a discussion that is not going to go away anytime soon.
No, absolutely not. We'll probably come back to it one day.
Really. But all right, let's move on to our second question. There's been a lot of questions surrounding the Tigers coming into this season regarding some of their top stars. So will their age and injury finally catch up to them this year?
Gonna say no. And here's why. I'll start with Miggy and V-Mart. They can alternate first base and DH throughout the entire season, and they're going to need to. Yeah, Cabrera is coming off another offseason surgery, and yeah, V-Mart's coming off another spring training injury. But by DHing, I'm not a big fan of the term, but it's kind of true. It's a half day off. You only have to worry about hitting. You can focus on that, and you don't have to worry about running your legs out there in the field. So that's going to be great for both Miggy and V-Mart. Should be a pretty good platoon. Verlander doesn't have to be the ace anymore, and he didn't have to be last year, or the last couple years rather. But with Price there and him taking the front charge, and he's been an ace for the majority of his career, especially in Tampa. So that's going to take a lot of pressure off him. And Anibal Sanchez is tricky because he at times could be an ace, and I've seen it. He led the AL in ERA in 2013, but injuries are more of a factor with him than anyone else. And I think the Tigers resolve that by skipping a start or two every now and then with him.
I mean, I feel like their age and definitely the injuries might catch up to them. Maybe not this year. They might get away with it. We don't know. But I think at least
Isn't the question this year?
I know it's this year, but I'm expanding it to maybe next year too. But let's talk about this year though, because Cabrera and V-Mart just started, their spring training debuts the other day because they were both coming off injuries.
That's
so
true.
they might not. They're seasoned veterans. They might not need as much time to get prepared for the season.
No, not at all.
But these injuries
rest more than preparation.
The knee injury. I know it's a different kind of knee injury, but this is 2 years in a row. Victor Martinez has had some sort of knee injury, and with Cabrera, I mean, we've seen him in the past few years battling with these injuries, having to work through it to try and get the Tigers into the playoffs. I don't know if they can continue to keep doing it and put up great numbers year after year.
I will say this. So V-Mart is unbelievable because he came back from a knee injury, as you said, last season and had the best season arguably of his career. There was a point in late May he had more home runs than he did strikeouts.
Yeah, that was great.
No one's ever seen something like that since, I don't know, maybe Tony Gwynn or something, And with Cabrera, he lost a lot of power. There's no denying that last season. He isn't Comerica, but there's a reason the Tigers got Yoenis Cespedes. I'm not even expecting that much from J.D. Martinez this year, but Yoenis I am. Nick Castellanos, I'm expecting big things because he was a Rookie of the Year candidate for most of the season. Usually rookies like that get better. Occasionally there's a sophomore slump, but I don't think he's going to have one because, again,
these young guys, though, it's a good point. These young guys are going to have to step up to take some of the pressure off these older guys.
Jose Iglesias is coming back. He hit 280, 290 a couple years ago.
I think the last point is Justin Verlander, with all the attention surrounding him, because last year he was coming in after the core surgery. He wasn't really the same. This year he's kind of healthy, whether he can bounce back. I think he can, but you never know. He is aging. He has a lot of innings on that arm, so he also might start declining.
Verlander is not the guy anymore he's not an ace anymore, but he's also not the guy anymore to throw later as the game goes on. That was always his big thing, especially in his MVP season.
We see that with this is the first year, about 7 years, he's not starting opening day. David Price got the nod.
Well, rightfully so, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I think Verlander's in the transitional period now, and he's finally accepting it where he has to rely more on location and his off-speed pitches rather than just throwing 98 miles per hour in the 8th inning of a baseball game. And, that's not easy for a pitcher to admit. And it's certainly not easy for a pitcher to adjust to that. But I think he's finally on board. I think the Tigers are on board with that. And again, I said it earlier, having Price be the ace takes a lot of pressure off of him.
I think this year they might get away with some of their
after
injuries
this year,
and age.
it's going to be interesting.
But the window, I think, for their time to win a World Series is kind of closing.
It is not necessarily closing, but it's getting to the point where they're going to have to make some serious adjustments around the team. I mean, they might have to sign a guy like Johnny Cueto or sign a guy like Ian Desmond.
But they do have a lot of big contracts that they might have to work around.
That's the problem, unfortunately.
Well, that'll do it for our first segment. After the break, we'll get into our rapid fire round. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to the Hot Corner. It's now time for a rapid fire round. We're each going to ask each other 3 questions. I have about 30 seconds to respond. Harrison, I'm going to start with your questions. Your first one is, what are the expectations for the Dodgers' new middle infield this year, which consists of Jimmy Rollins and Howie Kendrick?
Well, they're both on my fantasy team, so I'd say very high. But enough about my personal opinion. I think, the Dodgers, with their new front office, they really wanted to bring in a new plan. And obviously, it doesn't just start with those guys, but they're definitely a big part of it. And a couple of reasons. Jimmy Rollins, a proven leader, proven winner, proven veteran, great clubhouse guy. And I really liked that move. I can finally start rooting for him now that he's out of Philly, so that'll be interesting. I'm sure it'll be interesting for you being a diehard Phillies fan.
Yeah, he's still my favorite player of all time.
But I have been very high on Howie Kendrick for many years, and I think him and Jimmy Rollins combined, they're hitting 400 this spring, are really going to do great things.
And I mean, they're not going to have to take too long to get used to each other out there on the field either. They're going to
No, they've been goofing around. Have you seen their interviews?
They have some. Yeah, they're pretty good chemistry. So I think you're right. I think they're going to be okay.
And again, both hitting over 400 this spring.
If they can keep that up, that'd be really good for the Dodgers. For your second question, could Jonathan Lucroy capture the batting title to become the first catcher since Buster Posey in 2012?
Absolutely, especially since guys like Justin Morneau and Michael Kadire have been the last 2 NL batting title winners. Jonathan Lucroy might be one of the most underrated players in the game, along with Howie Kendrick, but he's a proven hitter. Unfortunately, was it last year or 2 years ago, he had that freak injury where he was reaching for a suitcase and hurt himself, so that backtracked him a bit. But take a look at his stats. He's hit no lower than 290 in the last 4 seasons. So I think with a little help from Carlos Gomez, maybe a bounce back season from Gene Segura, Ramos Ramirez's last season, Ryan Braun, I think a lot of protection will help him get a batting title.
I mean, he was a huge reason why for almost 5 months last year the Brewers were in first place.
Exactly, and he calls a great game too. Pitchers love working with him.
He's just great all-around great catcher. And for your final question, do the Marlins have the best outfield in baseball?
Yes, I absolutely believe they do. Giancarlo Stanton, we all know, probably going to win the MVP this year, certainly be in the running as he was last season. And then for the 2 people that people might not know as well, Marcell Ozuna and Christian Yelich, unbelievable ball players. Marcell Ozuna had almost 30 home runs and 100 RBIs last season, hit about 270. And Christian Yelich is a guy who's going to get on base, probably lead off for the Marlins this year. Him or D. Gordon, they could go 1 or 2 there. Steal 25, 30 bases, hit about 300. And then they all 3 of them have cannons out there in the outfield.
Which is
Giancarlo Stanton, we know. Marcell Ozuna, there was a play against the Mets, April or May last year. He threw a guy out from the warning track.
Yeah, he's got a good arm. But I think the only other team that they rival is the Pirates, and we've talked about it in the past with McCutchen, Marte, and Polanco. But
Polanco hasn't proven yet, though. So
I do have to agree with you, though, that the Marlins, they probably have the best outfield. But all right, time for you to ask me my questions.
All right, so for your first question, Brandon, the Dodgers just signed Cuban infielder Hector Olivera to a 6-year, $62.5 million contract. And this makes him the 5th Cuban player to be signed to a big multi-year contract in just the past few months. So it brings up the question, if 2 or more of these players fall flat, what's going to happen with these future contracts for future Cuban players? Will there be some sort of negative correlation there?
I think so. I mean, as of right now, these guys are getting these huge contracts because of the proven track records of the guys who've come before them. Like you said, Cespedes, Puig, even just Aroldis Chapman. I know
Jose
Abreu. These guys have come to the States and have put up amazing numbers. And so they're expecting all these other guys like Yohan Moncada, Yasmani Tomas, now with Oliveira, they're expecting the same kind of results. But I think if 2 of these guys, don't really pan out in the next year or 2, I do think we start to see a drop off in the not only amount of years, but the amount of money.
I agree with that.
Because
especially with the Japanese players, we got great players like Ichiro and Hideki Matsui and Hideo Nomo and Daisuke to some extent. But then we got players who fall flat like Kaz Matsui and Keiagawa. So there's such a contrast.
But last thing, I think if they only continue to put up great numbers, these contracts I think are only going to go higher. But if that's even possible, but
we'll see. Honestly, it'll be fun to watch though. Now for your second question, we'll go back to the Dodgers again. With starter Ryu going down with a shoulder injury and no real timetable for his return, does this open up talks again between the Dodgers and Phillies for your personal favorite, pitcher Cole Hamels?
I think it has to because the Dodgers, obviously, highest payroll in baseball. Money is not really an issue for them. But they weren't, even before he went down, they weren't going to be the same team that they were last year. They're still going to be good, but now with Ryu going down, and this is another injury similar to one last year, If he goes
you
down,
gotta be a little worried
yeah,
now.
and if he's down for an extended period of time, then you really only have Kershaw, which obviously greatest pitcher in baseball, and then Greinke, who might opt out of his contract after this year. So
And I believe, I'm not entirely sure, but I believe he has Scott Boras as his agent.
so then you're really only have one solid starter. So, but if you can get Hamels and lock up two great guys, two great lefties, and Kershaw and Hamels for a long period of time, they're going to be a force, more of a force to be reckoned with. They're going to have to give up some great prospects, though, in return, like Corey Seager, maybe Jock Peterson, to get Hamels, though. But I do think talks start again between the two.
I do agree with you, but the Dodgers, I think, as we talked about earlier today on our radio show, they really hurt themselves signing Brandon McCarthy to a 4-year, $60 million contract, especially since you said Cole Hamels is 4 years, $90 million
left with an option for a fifth.
That's $60 million they could have put towards that contract, so that's going to be interesting to see. And McCarthy, I think we both agree, does not deserve that.
Not the
Yankee
contract
fans are
he got.
probably saying a prayer they didn't have to pay that money.
Yeah.
And now for your final question, Brandon. After the fantastic rookie season he had in Jose Abreu, the White Sox first baseman, and winning Rookie of the Year, can he win the MVP this season?
He has a good shot. Obviously, I think he'll have to battle Mike Trout for it if Miguel Cabrera has another good year. Victor Martinez. But the numbers he put up last year, and he even missed some time with some injuries, but he hit 36 home runs, 107 RBIs, 317 batting average, slugged 581. I mean, he was a monster last year. He was a rookie, but he also had some professional time over in Cuba. But he's now going to have Adam LaRoche and Melky Cabrera for protection around him. He didn't really have anybody like that last year.
On top of other guys like Adam Eaton and Alexi Ramirez, too.
So, I mean, the numbers, if he just continues to build on them, I don't see how he's not going to be in the MVP discussions.
I hope he is. He was my second pick for fantasy this year, so I'm pulling for him.
Sounds like you have a really
anyone.
good team for fantasy.
I try.
Yeah. All right, but that'll do it for our rapid fire round. After the break, we'll wrap things up with Coming At You. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. It's now time for Coming At You. We're just going to ask each other a question made up on the spot, and we'll have about a minute to respond. So, Harrison, we're going to start with you. What's your question for me?
All right, let's keep the theme of the Philadelphia Phillies here. We're hearing a lot about Cole Hamels again, as we did all offseason. We heard about this other guy briefly, but not so recently. Jonathan Papelbon, is he here to stay in Philly, or are we waiting for the trade deadline to finally see him, pack up and potentially go to a winner?
I think now that spring training, has started and we're so close to opening day, I think he probably, if moved at all, will be moved closer to trade deadline, because I think teams would have wanted to have him in there at the start of spring, kind of work on some things and see if they could fit into their organization beforehand. I think there are going to be a lot more teams come trade deadline if they're in it and they're having bullpen problems who go after a guy like Papelbon. But I do think he's moved. I think it will take the Phillies maybe throwing in some money, because if he ends or is on the mound at the end of games for 48 of those, his option for next year already kicks in.
They're not going to want that.
and I think anyway, if he's traded, he might want a team to just already guarantee that, regardless if he gets it or not. So I think the Phillies might have to throw in some money there. But I don't think, if they can get some prospects back for that, I don't think they're going to mind doing that. So I don't think he's here to stay. But I personally, as a Phillies fan, he's consistent last year. I think he's going to be consistent again this year. He's having a good spring. And I know people always get on him, but he is a leader out there in that bullpen. Those young guys like Giles, Diekman, and even DeFreitas, they look up to him. They have nothing but good things to say about him. So I won't mind if we have to hold on to him, but there is no real reason for the Phillies to keep him.
Yeah, he's had a rough last few seasons. His last year in Boston was that major collapse.
Yeah.
It was Francona's last year. Then the second he gets to Philly, you guys stop winning.
We haven't had a
all of
winning
sudden.
season since he's been in Philly. That's the whole reason he came here.
So he's got to be frustrated. And I know the two teams I heard he was linked to were the Brewers and Blue Jays. And the Brewers brought back K-Rod, so that's very unlikely. Blue Jays, they lost Casey Jansen, so I don't really know if they have a true closer. So that might be a team to look out for.
Again, the money thing with them, I don't think they're going to be able to afford it unless the Phillies chip in some money.
That's a good point. So we'll see.
But all right, it's time for my question for you. Talking about the Mets, let's go back to your team now since we talked about the Phillies. You had so much optimism at the start of spring training, but now there's been quite a few injuries. Two pitchers have gone down to Tommy John surgery. A few other guys dinged up a little bit. Are you still as optimistic as you were a few weeks ago? I'm
still very optimistic, but I am a little worried, but not for the reasons you'd expect. I'm actually more upset about the Josh Edgin injury than the Zach Wheeler injury, and I explained this earlier. Very shocking, but I'll explain why. Zach Wheeler, I've never been as high on as everyone else has recently. He had a great season, but every time I watch him pitch, I notice his breaking pitches are not as good as they could be, at least compared to like Matt Harvey or Jacob deGrom. And I always kind of wondered that. And I think now that we know he had some arm discomfort for a good portion of last season, that might have something to do with it. The throw curveball is a lot of strain on your arm. So that's, he probably wanted to avoid throwing that as much as he could. But he'll come back hopefully next season stronger than ever and really live up to his potential. He's 24 years old. He's not even in the prime of his career yet. So I'm not too worried about him. I am more Josh Edgen. It's terrible to see him go because the Mets bullpen is going to be one of the best on paper that it's been in years, and he was the one lefty we could count on. He had a great season, was able to neutralize guys like Freddie Freeman, Jason Hayward, Bryce Harper, Denard Span, all those tough lefties in our division. And, now, unfortunately, he's going to sit for the season, and the Mets are scrambling to find some lefty reliever now, and we don't know. We're playing Russian roulette here. We don't know what we're going to get, and it's going to be very hard to see. We might have to try 3 or 4 guys. We might have to go in the system. We have to sign someone to a minor league contract. So they're going to be scrambling there. And then there's the other injuries. Daniel Murphy pulled his hamstring. I think he'll be fine.
And these aren't like full season. These
no.
guys are going to come back. And
Flores, I was a little scared about because there was rumors he fractured his foot on that foul ball against the Yankees.
You've had a shortstop problem for a long time. He's actually having a good spring.
He's hitting over 400. But the Mets have a pretty cool story developing right now. I think his name's Michael Nuno or something along those lines. Maybe Miguel Nuno. Never played in the majors before. He's number 74 on the roster, so he's still with the team, looking like he might make the club out of spring training. So it's a cool story to see. Yeah. So there's always a little silver lining there. I
think you guys might be all right.
I'm not too
losing Wheeler is huge.
If it was DeGrom or Harvey, I would have been devastated.
Yeah, and with he has a live arm, really good fastball. But with these Tommy John surgeries, you see these pitchers come back and their velocity is just fine, as we're seeing with Matt Harvey.
And we'll see with Harvey. I mean, he's already getting up to 98, 99 constantly, so it's exciting.
But that'll do it for this episode of The Hot Corner. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, if you're interested in joining LTV, like us on Facebook or email us at ltv@tcnj.edu. For Harrison Duhr, I'm Brandon Magown. Have a good one.